Okay, so let's just start with a pretty general. Can you kind of just tell me about this movie and, what the details of this movie are?
So in 2003, I met the getaway driver from the biggest bank heist of all time. And he told me the most amazing story about not only how they pulled it off, but how he got away. And I thought it was incredible, um, not only because it was a great bank heist story, but because the target was Richard Nixon.
Mhm.
And I had just had a screenplay appear on the big screen. It was called Showtime with Robert De Niro and Eddie Murphy. And I was looking for another screenplay to write, and this practically wrote itself. So it's a fun and kind of a swashbuckling story about guys who took on the most powerful man in the world. And it took 15 years, but Hollywood finally put it all together.
Wow. And so these were seven guys from Youngstown, is that correct?
Correct. The Boardman, Poland area, Youngstown was the home for Emil Dinzio, who I think legitimately is the LeBron James of bank burglars. He operated a loose knit group of about 100 nefarious characters. And when he heard about Nixon extorting money on the campaign trail and hiding it in a little bank in Southern California, it was too much for him to resist.
So he's the one who told these guys to go there and rob Nixon.
Well,
No.
actually, the tip came from Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa had donated money in order to get a pardon. Jimmy Hoffa was in jail, the Teamsters leader, uh, and he was in jail for bribery. And he worked it out with Richard Nixon behind the scenes that he would contribute $3 million to Nixon's reelection campaign. So Nixon took that money and hid it in a bank because you can't take money from a guy in prison to run for president. Um, Hoffa got mad at Nixon. He wanted his money back, so he sent guys from Youngstown to get it.
Where was Hoffa in prison at? Is it around?
Um, I'm not sure. Check the history books on that one.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So, where are you guys? Where did they shoot this movie? So you're the screenwriter for it. Where was the movie shot at?
The movie was shot in Dallas, Georgia, a little town. I didn't go. The screenwriter, we stay behind. They don't have the big budget for us. But the little town of Dallas, Georgia, had to serve as Laguna Niguel, California, Youngstown, Ohio, Brookville, Pennsylvania, where one of the people escaped to, and Washington, D.C. So the story I heard behind the scenes from director Mark Johnson was that they got a palm tree and put it in the background of several shots to make it look like California. The same palm tree can be seen in many shots of the film.
Okay. Um, so tell me, what kind of history do you know about these guys from Youngstown? I mean, do you know like what neighborhoods they were from or what they were involved in? Any family ties, anything like that?
Well, it was a family. So it's Emil Dinzio, James Dinzio. Those are brothers.
Amy.
They were notorious for being kind of good guy thieves. Everybody in town seemed to like them. Uh, Emil's, let's see, it would be his brother-in-law, Chuck Mulligan, was also involved in this. And then his two nephews, Harry and Ronnie Barber. Harry Barber unexpectedly becomes the star of the show. He's the getaway driver. He's the guy who told me the story. And he moved to Southern California in the 1950s, but he got 41 speeding tickets in 1 year. The judge tore up his driver's license, and his mother punished him by sending him back to Poland, Ohio to live with his grandmother. And that's where he got a job with Emil. Emil ran a business where he operated vending machines. and Harry was the guy who loaded and unloaded the coins from the vending machines. But they had their eye on something bigger, this bank in Southern California.
Okay. What was it about Youngstown boys? I mean, back in this was what, 1972?
Right.
Why out of all people did they send 7 boys from Youngstown to do this?
That's funny that you should bring up that phrase because that was the title of the movie all the way up until a couple of years ago. So I called it the Youngstown Boys because it was something about them. Youngstown in the 1960s, there was an article, as you know, in the Saturday Evening Post that labeled Youngstown Crime Town, USA. And these guys were of that era. They Harry told me that he had a poster of Steve McQueen on his wall. Steve McQueen was kind of a bigger than life movie star who always got away with the car and the girl and the gun, and so it was kind of natural for him to start a life of crime, and he joined in with his uncle. I don't know what you guys are drinking in the water out there, but that's where they all came from.
That's funny. So the changing of the title had to do with Harry then.
Right. So Harry tells me about that he always loved Steve McQueen, and when I was replaced as a screenwriter, we share credit on this. Ken Hickson did a great job following me. He rewrote the screenplay a few years ago. It takes a long time to get a movie made, and Ken came up with the idea that let's call it Finding Steve McQueen. So it went from the Youngstown Boys to Finding Steve McQueen.
Okay. What did Harry tell you in your conversations about Youngstown? Did he say anything specific about what he was involved in or anything, any particulars about Youngstown?
So I have a new podcast that drops tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Crime Beat, and the first season is Stealing Nixon's Millions. Harry in that it opens with Harry talking about his life, where he talks about how he mowed some lawns and took some coins out of vending machines, and naturally kind of fell into a life of crime with his uncle. He said that they started with supermarkets. They would rob supermarkets, and then night drops at banks where businesses would drop their money in the night slot, and Emil and his crew would break in there and take that money. They always left the money of the church, though. They said they never took the church money because that was against the Ten Commandments. But so yeah, that's where they came from.
Okay. Are these supermarkets and banks and things that they robbed around here?
Yeah, that's what he told me. He said, however, that when it got cold in the winter, as you guys are experiencing right now,
Mm-hmm.
they would go to Florida, they would go to Oklahoma, they would go to Texas. Harry was really adamant to tell me that these were not, as he calls them, weekend warriors, that they studied alarm systems. They learned how to beat alarms in all situations. He told me this great story once about a Sears in Youngstown. I don't know if you still have a Sears there, but he said Emil one day was walking through Sears and didn't recognize the alarm that was on the wall. And so he dared Harry to rip the alarm off the wall. So Harry did it. He stole the burglar alarm and put it in the back of his car, but he couldn't get the alarm to turn off. So he asked me, Keith, have you ever driven in a car with a burglar alarm going off in the back seat? And I said, I can't say that I have, Harry. He said, well, it's a horrible thing. And but they were able to take that burglar alarm apart. They found how it worked, and then they were able to beat the alarm system.
Wow. What does Harry do now? I mean, is he just like a normal citizen now? I mean, or does he still rob banks?
Well, he's a good guy who, you know, he talks fondly about his days as a bank burglar and a fugitive, but he has some regrets. He says he didn't have a comfortable night for a very long time, not knowing if the feds were going to be knocking at the door. He's a handyman. He lives in a trailer in a little town called Montclair, not too far from here. Yeah, he lives with a little dog, and for many years he took care of his mother, Viola. She died last year, I believe. He's a really good guy. So he he'll find himself being played by Travis Fimmel in this new Hollywood movie.
Okay. What kind of scenes can we see from like what you guys are doing Youngstown wise? I mean, in the movie, I guess.
Oh, let's see. There are so the movie the movie doesn't focus a lot on Youngstown. There are some establishing scenes of the brothers working together, planning the bank heist before they come to Southern California. So Youngstown, in that sense, doesn't play a huge
Mhm.
role in the movie, in the buildup of the movie. It's just where these guys are from.
Okay. So you kind of see maybe just a little bit of when they're in Youngstown getting ready, planning. Is
Yes.
okay. So is this when does this come out again?
It's March 15th. It'll be in 10 cities around the United States. And the way they release movies these days, it will be on demand. So on your streaming service, Dish Network, Time Warner Cable, DirecTV, services like that will show it on the 15th. So you can watch it without going to the theater if that's what you choose.
Okay. And it will be in theaters though as well.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what cities it will be in?
They haven't announced the schedule yet. I know that it will be in Southern California.
Okay.
I'll be going to that one, but I'm not sure about the closest one to Youngstown.
Okay. So then, but people in Youngstown could watch it on demand though.
Correct.
Okay. Do you think people in Youngstown will be interested in this? Like, what kind of interest do you think it'll spark from the Youngstown?
Well, I think it's a nostalgic story about a time that's kind of gone by. It's got a good romance. It's got a good heist. It's a different era though. When these guys came to Southern California, they lived in a condominium that they thought movie stars should live in. It was such a strange world for them. They were kind of like fish out of water coming to Southern California from Youngstown. So I think people from Youngstown will be nostalgic for that time, but they'll get a good popcorn movie out of the deal.
Hmm. And tell me about your podcast too, because I know that you're going to be kind of going over what kind of happened in your podcast.
So it's called Crime Beat, and you can search for it on iTunes, Stitcher, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search Crime Beat, and you'll find it. And it drops tomorrow. It's a six-part series going back from when the crime was a twinkle in Emil Dinzio's eye to the time it becomes a Hollywood movie. So it's a little bit different than a lot of true crime podcasts because it's fun and there isn't a murder and there isn't a kind of a grim way to tell the story. This is guys who took on the president. It's kind of funny. It's kind of sweet and charming, that they thought that they could get away with this.
Hmm.
And then the unexpected surprise is that when Harry gets away, he falls in love. And there's a good love story in the second half of this podcast and in the movie that you'll enjoy.
Tell me what are the details of the robbery? Because I know were you saying that it was like the wrong
Well,
bank,
safety
maybe, or
deposit
the
boxes first.
safety deposits, and then it
Right.
might have been the wrong bank. So, like, how did that kind of all play out?
So when you rob a bank, you walk in with a gun and demand all the money from the vault, right?
Sure, yeah.
This was not that. This was a burglary where they cut a hole in the roof, dropped 16 sticks of dynamite, and exploded the roof of the vault. And they dropped in from the sky. Um, they had to open 500 safe deposit boxes and didn't know what was inside. They were searching for Nixon's money, and there's some debate as to whether they actually got the $30 million they were after. So you'll have to listen to the podcast and watch the movie to find out.
Wow. That's so interesting. So, I mean, that took a lot of planning to pull off something like that.
It was the best heist I've ever seen.
Wow. And did Harry kind of like tell you about like what went into planning to do something like that?
Oh yeah, and it didn't go the way they planned. Things started to go wrong, and it got very tense at the end. They broke into the same bank 3 nights in a row, if you can believe that.
Wow.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night, while they were on the bank was on a weekend, and nobody caught them. They were the best.
So interesting. But I'm sure like these days that wouldn't happen. I mean, as far as
With security systems and infrared and motion detectors and things like that, no. But for their time, they really broke the bank.
a lot easier to do things like that. Um, what else here? Do you know of any Youngstown history or places here in Youngstown that they may have told you about that kind of relates to?
Well, okay, I'll tell you this one. So when they came to Southern California, one of the guys, Charlie Mulligan, knew he had an old friend named Early Dawson from Youngstown who he knew from high school. And I'm not sure the high school that Chuck Mulligan went to. But Early Dawson lived a few miles from the bank. And what's the harm in looking up an old friend, right? So while they were doing this burglary, they had some downtime. He asked Early Dawson, "Can I hide the car, the getaway car, in your garage?"
Mm.
And Early said, "Sure." And Early unwittingly became part of the biggest bank heist of all time. He was a Youngstown guy as well. He eventually turned state's evidence, testified, and went into the witness protection program because of his role in the heist.
Wow. And his garage was here in Youngstown?
No, his garage was in Tustin, California, but he's from Youngstown,
Oh,
and that's why they looked him up.
okay, interesting. All right. Let's see here. Is there anything else that we
What was the budget of the movie? Do you
oh,
know?
the budget of the movie?
It's an independent film. I think the budget was less than $10 million.
And who's releasing it?
And who's releasing it?
It's being released by E1 Entertainment, and they own a company called Momentum Pictures. It stars Travis Fimmel, Forrest Whitaker, Rachel Taylor, William Fichtner, Louis Lombardi, Lily Rabe. It's got a great cast. I think people will love it.